My name is Claire Donovan, and I found out about my sister's wedding while holding a flimsy paper plate of macaroni salad at a backyard barbecue. It was one of those humid June afternoons where the heat seems to settle in your shoes thick enough to slow your thoughts. Someone had turned up a Tracy Lawrence playlist too loud for the speakers, and the smell of charcoal clung to the air like an old argument no one wanted to revisit. I was standing between the lemonade cooler and a table with sweating soda cans when my cousin Brianna walked over from the grill, her ponytail high and her tone higher. So she chirped, brushing ash off her shorts. "You're flying in for Lindsay's big day or just driving up?" I blinked. "Big day." She laughed, thinking I was joking. "The wedding, duh. She's finally marrying Tyler, the guy with the Tesla and the wet look hair gel." I forced a smile. "Oh, right." Then I excused myself to check on the deviled eggs, which was code for sitting in my car with the AC blasting, trying to breathe past the quiet panic crawling up my ribs. Lindsay was my baby sister. I was 14 when she was born. After our dad died, I practically raised her. I taught her how to tie her shoes, helped her through her first breakup with a boy named Kellen in high school, and wired her money more times than I could count when she forgot about rent. I mailed her a heated blanket during her first winter panic attacks in college. I was the one who stayed on the phone until 3 in the morning the night she thought Tyler was cheating. And now she was marrying him with florals favors, probably a Pinterest board, and apparently a guest list that didn't include me. I sat in the car for a long time holding my plate. The macaroni was already melting into a warm blob under the sun. Inside, someone had cut into a strawberry sheet cake. From the window, I saw my mom Linda smiling in her soft blue sundress, laughing like everything in the world was exactly as it should be. It wasn't anger I felt. Not yet. It was the quiet thud of being forgotten so thoroughly that it seemed intentional. 2 days later, I called my mother. I didn't want an apology. I just needed her to say it out loud, that they had planned it all without me. She picked up on the second ring. "Hi, honey," she said, with that overly pleasant tone she reserved for PTA meetings and customer service. "Is Lindsay getting married?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. There was a pause. Then a refrigerator door clicked shut. "Well, yes," she said. Like I'd asked whether we still used the same trash company. "Next month. We weren't sure if you'd be free." "I didn't know it was happening." She chuckled. "Oh, Claire, don't be dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. The same one she used when I cried at Dad's funeral, or the time I called her sobbing after losing my job, and she told me, "You'll land on your feet, sweetheart." I stayed silent. She continued, Lindsay wanted something small. "Just family." "I am family," I said quieter than I expected. She sighed. "Yes, but you're always traveling, and these things get complicated. Tyler's parents had a lot of input, and there were limited spots. You understand." I didn't. But I knew better than to say so. "You're not mad, are you?" she added, her voice tilting into something softer. "I'm not. We just thought it would be easier this way," she said. "Less pressure on everyone." That word, easier. I almost forgot that. I was the easy one. I told her I didn't opened my calendar and scrolled to it. The weekend was no RSVP, no save the date, no save. I didn't post about it. I didn't rage or cry. Instead, I bought a one-way ticket to Iceland. I didn't tell anyone, not my boss, not my best friend Ellie, not even my next-door neighbor who always brought in my mail when I was out of town. I simply left a sticky note on my fridge that said, "Gone. Don't wait up." The flight out of Boston was overnight and strangely quiet. I didn't read. I didn't watch movies. I just watched the seatback map following the pale line curving over Greenland like a scar someone forgot to heal. By the time we landed in Reykjavik, it was early morning. Mist clung to the ground like wool. The rental cabin was tucked into a moss-covered hillside beside a lake that looked frozen but wasn't. The air smelled faintly of sulfur and pine, and for the first time in years I could breathe. The silence in Iceland was different. It wasn't the kind of silence that followed slammed doors or cut phone lines. It was deeper, quieter, like the whole world had exhaled. On my first full day, I didn't check my phone. I didn't unpack everything. I drank black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug and sat on the porch wrapped in a wool blanket, watching clouds roll across the slate-colored sky. The only sound was wind skimming across the lake. That evening, I took a photo of myself sitting on a bench by the water. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't dressed up. I was just there in my coat still present. I posted it to my Instagram story. No caption, just the image. Within minutes, the scene view list lit up. Lindsay, my cousin Brianna, my mother. No one said anything, no messages, no likes. But I hadn't expected any. That wasn't the point. The point was, they saw me. Not at the bridal shower, not at the rehearsal dinner, not in any group text planning the big day. But here, surrounded by ice and steam, I had made myself visible. The next morning, I walked down to the edge of the lagoon. The air bit at my face, and the bench was half buried in snow. I sat until I couldn't feel my fingers. I didn't post anything that day. I just was. I wrote in my journal, scribbling down lists instead of thoughts. No small talk, no pretending I'm fine, no gift registry, no RSVP. No one needs anything from me. Iceland became a kind of mirror, not to see myself clearly, but to realize what wasn't mine to carry anymore. I'd known the wedding was that weekend, even though no one had said the date aloud. I found out the way people always find out what their family doesn't want them to know, through hints, hashtags, and the corners of photos they weren't supposed to see. A tagged boutique hotel near Saratoga. A boomerang of champagne flutes. A filtered selfie from someone I hadn't spoken to in years with a caption that read, "Love is in the air, Feiju." That Saturday, I woke early. The light outside was silver and cold. There were no church bells here. No bridesmaids zipping dresses behind closed doors. Just snow, steam, stillness. I made oatmeal and watched the fog move in over the lake. By mid-afternoon, I figured they were probably starting. Maybe Lindsay was walking down the aisle in something lace and sleeveless. Maybe my mother was crying on cue, her tissue tucked neatly into her palm. Somewhere in the photos, there'd be a chair where I was supposed to sit. Maybe they filled it. Maybe they didn't. But I knew. That evening I posted another photo, just my hand holding a cup of tea. The frozen lake in the background. Lavender sky. My nail polish chipped slightly on my thumb. Still no caption. Again, within minutes seen by they. Lindsay. My mom. Brianna. Even two of Lindsay's college friends I hadn't heard from since graduation. Still, no one said anything. But this time it felt different. The silence had shifted. It wasn't just absence. It was presence withheld. They knew. And now they wondered, what did I know? They hadn't missed me. Not really. But they saw me now just enough to feel uneasy. And maybe that was the first time I realized I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was just watching the space I used to fill. On Sunday, I didn't post anything. I didn't scroll. I didn't wonder what dress she wore, or whether the cake had almond filling like she used to beg for when we were kids. I went into town, walked past a bakery that smelled like burnt sugar and cardamom, and bought a hand-knit scarf from a woman who told me I had kind eyes. I wore it back to the cabin and lit a small candle in the window. The wind picked up that night. The windows rattled, but inside everything was still. I made soup, read the same paragraph 3 times, let the silence stretch. By Monday morning, I felt lighter, like I'd walked out of something without realizing how heavy it had been. Then my phone started buzzing. 1 missed call, then 3, then 7. I let them go. It wasn't until I saw Julia's name flash on my screen that I paused. Julia was my friend from college. The only one who had ever told me when I was being too kind, too forgiving, too silent for my good. Her message was short. You need to see this. Attached to TikTok. No explanation. Just a thumbnail of a reception hall and what looked like something midair. I stared at it and clicked. The video started in the middle of chaos, shouting gasps, people turning. A bridesmaid's voice cracked through the noise. You were my best friend Lindsay, my maid of honor. You slept with him. The phone jerked as someone shouted. A centerpiece shattered. The camera found Lindsay red-faced and sobbing, yelling something incoherent, while mascara streaked down her cheeks. And across from her, Rachel, her best friend since high school, was screaming back, voice raw and trembling. You knew I loved him. You knew. And you did it anyway. The crowd had started to move. Someone knocked over a chair. Someone else walked out holding a napkin. Then, just before the video ended, Tyler was caught between them, frozen, like he didn't know where to stand anymore. It ended with Lindsay dropping to the floor. No music, no dancing, no celebration, just the wreckage. I watched it twice. Then I set my phone down, walked to the kitchen, and boiled water for tea. The kettle whistled softly, and I let it. I didn't rush to pour the water or check my phone again. I moved slowly, deliberately, because for once, there was no need to hurry. No one is waiting for me to fix anything. I carried my tea to the window and stood barefoot on the cold wooden floor of the cabin. Outside, the lake rippled beneath a pale sky, the wind threading through the skeletal branches along the hillside. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel vindicated. I felt still. But the buzzing began again. A chorus of missed calls and voicemails stacking like snowdrifts. Names I hadn't seen in months, suddenly blinking across my screen. Lindsay's college roommate, Aunt Carol. My mother. Then finally, Lindsay herself. Each message built on the last. At first brisk and clipped, then more urgent, then pleading. From my mother, Claire, please. Your sister's a mess. She won't eat. She hasn't come downstairs. Then, we don't know what to do without you. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't mention the fact that I had been right. Not about Tyler necessarily, but about what they had chosen to ignore. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a third photo. Just the horizon. A soft pink haze over the glacier's edge. Quiet, vast, empty. And within minutes, again they saw it. Lindsay. My mother. Even Aunt Carol, who once told me that older daughters are like extra mothers. I'd been 15 when she said that, and the weight of those words still clung to my spine like winter frost. This time, Lindsay didn't call. She sent a message. No punctuation, just fragile words on a screen. I know I hurt you. I didn't think it would matter this much. I thought you didn't want to be part of things anymore. Please, I need you. I don't know who else to ask. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't believe but because it was the first real thing she'd said to me in years. But it still wasn't enough. Because it wasn't me they missed. It was the role I played. The strong one. The one who picked up the pieces. The one who held everything together while fading quietly from the center. They missed the scaffolding, not the soul. That afternoon, I wrapped myself in the scarf I'd bought in town and walked to the lagoon. There was one bench, wooden, half buried in snow. I sat down, the wind biting at my cheeks, and looked out over the frozen water. A single gull skimmed the surface. I didn't post anything. I didn't answer the messages piling in. I just sat in the quiet. That evening, my phone rang again. The screen lit up with my mother's name. I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. I finally picked up, not because I had softened or forgiven, but because I wanted my voice to speak, not be spoken for. Claire, she breathed like she'd been holding the air in her lungs for hours. I didn't speak. I waited. She's not doing well, she said. Lindsay. She's barely eating. She just lies there. She keeps asking if you've responded. I could hear the clink of ceramic in the background. Probably her favorite blue teacup, the one she used when she wanted to appear delicate. I wish you were here, she added. I was, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. For years, you just didn't see me. There was a pause. A different kind of silence this time. Not defensive, not rushed. Just still. I didn't know you felt that way, she said finally. You never said. No one ever asked. Her breath hitched just slightly. A sound like realization slipping through the cracks. I'm sorry, she whispered. But it came out like a question, not an apology. I didn't answer. And for once, she didn't try to fill the silence. There were no rewrites, no excuses, no stories about how complicated it all was. Just breathe. And the soft ticking of the clock behind her. Are you coming home? She asked after a while. I looked around my little cabin. The wool blanket was draped over the chair. The ceramic mug was half full on the windowsill. The wind was dancing through the moss-covered rocks. Everything was mine. Everything was simple. No, I said gently. I think I'm finally home. We didn't say goodbye. The call just faded. Later that night, I lit a candle and reread old journal entries. Some were pages long, aching with resentment I hadn't known I still carried. Others were barely a sentence. But all of them pointed to the same thing I had always been trying to prove my value. And I was done. The next morning, I woke up early. The lake looked like glass. I wrapped myself in a sweater and stepped out onto the deck with a steaming cup of tea. The sun was rising low and golden like it had waited just for me. Back inside, I pulled out the thick stationery I'd packed months ago and never used. I wrote slowly, carefully, each letter pressed into the paper like truth. No lists, no accusations. Just this: I hope you find peace. I hope you tell the truth. I hope next time the invitation comes before the apology. Claire. I signed it with my full name. No return address. That afternoon I walked into the village and dropped it in the red postbox beside the bakery. The man at the counter recognized me and smiled. Cold today, he said, nodding toward the window. I smiled back. Not as much as yesterday. On the way home, I stopped at the lagoon again. The same wooden bench waited there. This time, I didn't sit. I just stood sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching the steam rise into the pale air. My phone stayed in my pocket, untouched. Unnecessary. When I returned to the cabin, the air inside was warm from the sun, stretching through the windows, but it felt like something had cooled for good. I took one last photo that afternoon. A chair, wooden empty, framed by snow and stillness. Beyond it, the lake glimmered muted and serene. I posted it. No caption, but I knew they would see it, not because they still followed me, but because people always notice what's missing once the silence gets too loud. And just like that, the buzz began again. Not frantic this time, just desperate. The first message came from my mother. She's not well. She keeps asking for you. Claire, please, just 5 minutes. Then from my father's sister, Aunt Maggie, who hadn't spoken to me since the last family Christmas I'd attended. She's shattered. No one knows how to reach her but you. Even Rachel messaged me. Just one sentence: I'm sorry you weren't there. You probably would have stopped me, but she was wrong. I wouldn't have stopped her. I would have let the truth do exactly what it did: rise, explode, unravel the performance they had all been rehearsing so carefully. And I would have stood still just as I had now, watching the pieces fall. The texts kept coming. From people who had called me invisible for years in quieter ways, by forgetting to ask how I was, by dismissing my exhaustion, by assuming I could always carry it all without complaint. Now their voices were softer, their words less polished. The control was gone. From my mother again: she hasn't left her room since Saturday. She won't eat. She won't speak. Claire, please. You've always been the strong one. The one who holds everyone together. That line. I'd heard it my entire life. And every time it was said, I felt less seen, not more. Being the strong one didn't mean I didn't hurt. It just meant I was the one who bled quietly, who bandaged others first, and cried behind closed doors. This time, I let the words settle on the screen without responding. I made soup, lit the fire, pulled the wool blanket around my shoulders, and read the same sentence in a dog-eared novel until it no longer meant anything, not out of distraction, but because I wasn't in a hurry to leave the quiet. There was no victory in this, just clarity, no closure, just space. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I just felt real. The next morning, I left the cabin for a long walk, boots crunching over icy soil, scarf pulled high over my mouth. The cold bit at my skin, but it didn't matter. The air felt clean. About halfway down the path near the water's edge, my phone buzzed again. Not a call, just another message. This onus E from Lindsay herself. Not dramatic, not long. Just I know I messed up. I didn't think it would hurt you this much. I thought you didn't care anymore. I was wrong. Please. I need you. I don't know who else to ask. I stopped walking and read it again. Then again, I could almost hear her voice in it, cracked small. The voice she used as a child when she broke something and didn't want to get in trouble. Only this time, it wasn't a broken vase or a ruined phone. It was something much more fragile. Us. I stood there on the trail for what felt like a full hour. Not frozen, but suspended. Considering whether anything could be put back together without first letting it fall completely apart. It wasn't that I didn't love her. It was that love without respect felt hollow. Like cheering from the back of the room while being written out of the story. Still, something about her message echoed with truth. Not an excuse. Not performance. Just need. I walked back to the cabin slowly. Steam rose from the mug I'd left on the windowsill, and I sat beside it, hands curled around the ceramic. The sky was a bright, empty blue. Not kind, not cruel, just wide. That afternoon I didn't post anything. Let the quiet speak for me. Let them wonder. Let them finally sit with what I had sat with for years. By nightfall, the messages had slowed. They weren't angry now. They were fragile, as if the senders were afraid they'd pushed me past the point of return. And maybe in a way they had, because the woman I'd been, the one who would have dropped everything and flown home to console everyone else, that woman was gone. She had packed a suitcase, boarded a plane, and found peace in a place where no one expected her to save them. And in that peace, she had found herself again. I lay on the couch that night, curled up under the wool blanket, staring at the cabin ceiling as the wind whispered against the windows. Somewhere inside me, something softened. Not enough to forgive, but enough to feel the weight lift. I woke before the sun the next morning, the sky still a smoky gray. The lake below the cabin had turned to glass again, reflecting only what it chose to keep. I made tea and wrapped myself in the scarf, then stepped onto the deck with my journal under one arm. The steam from the mug curled into the air, and I let it rise. I flipped open the journal and wrote a single sentence: I was never invisible. Just easy to overlook. That truth didn't hurt anymore. It didn't burn the way it once had. It settled inside me like warmth in the chest on the first day of spring, quiet, slow, undeniable. Later that day, I bundled up and returned to the village, walking past the bakery with its ever-present scent of cinnamon and ash. The man behind the counter gave me a nod, as if I had always belonged here. When I returned to the cabin, I sat by the window with a pen in hand and no plan for what to write. I wasn't crafting a letter this time, not for them. This time it was for me. Just a list of things I had survived. Being the oldest daughter, being the one who never needed help, being uninvited, being replaced, being remembered only when something broke. The last entry, being left out of a wedding, and finally realizing I had outgrown the room. That evening, I posted one final photo. Just a wooden chair, empty, framed by snow. Behind it, the lake shimmered softly like it held secrets it had no intention of sharing. No caption, no message. But I knew they'd see it. and I knew they would feel it, not as a cry for attention, but as a marker, a quiet way of saying, I was here, I still am, and this time I'm not coming back just to be your silence again. My phone buzzed once, then stopped. I didn't check. Instead, I made soup from scratch, lit a candle, and sat down with a book I hadn't read since college. The words felt new again, like they had waited for me to grow into them. I read slowly, turning each page like it mattered. Because it did. The next morning, I stood outside in the early light, wrapped in every soft thing I owned. The sun crept up over the ridge, the snow still untouched, except for my footprints down by the lagoon. There was no dramatic ending, no grand gesture, no last-minute reconciliation. Just peace. Just breathe. Just the soft knowing that something had shifted permanently and that I didn't need anyone else to see it for it to be real. I wrote one final journal entry. Not a confession. Not a goodbye. Just a truth. You don't have to be invited to a table that was never built for you. You can build your own. And sit there alone, sure, but free. I sealed the notebook with a red ribbon and tucked it in the bottom of my suitcase. Later that afternoon, I folded the scarf carefully and placed it on the cabin's windowsill, a gift to the place that had returned me to myself. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just closed the door behind me and walked toward whatever was next. Not waiting to be needed, just ready to be whole. There was no triumph, no parade waiting for me when I stepped into stillness. No perfect words to wrap around the ache of years spent holding a family together. And sometimes truth is softer than we expect, more like a blanket pulled over cold shoulders with a sword raised to the sky. I never needed to be the savior. I just needed to be seen. In the sacrifice, it was sacred. It gave me space to stop reacting, stop explaining, and simply be. They called it abandonment. They called it selfish. But it was recognition. The family learned something too, about the weight of omission, about what happens when the person who always came through simply doesn't. And I learned that not all doors have to be slammed to be closed. Some are just quietly locked for your good. I still don't know if they'll ever understand what they did or what they didn't do, but that's no longer my burden to carry. I no longer need to be their strength. I just need to be mine. And for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to take up space, to sit in the light of my own making, to let the phone ring without guilt. Because sometimes, the most powerful message isn't a confrontation, it's a quiet chair in the snow, and the choice to stay seated. Alone, peaceful, present,